As we set forth on this journey, I feel compelled to warn you that the story that unfolds contains mature themes. The story delves into the multifaceted experience of new motherhood, the delicate interplay of family relationships, and the emotional upheaval caused by infidelity. If these topics bring about any unease, you might consider stopping your viewing here. On that serene morning, I stood in the kitchen, my fingers tracing the smooth, cool surface of the granite countertop. The refrigerator's hum vibrated with an unexpected intensity. It could have been the quiet that wrapped around the scene, or maybe it was the weight of everything that had led to this house, this existence, this instant where all things appeared to align at last. For what felt like an eternity, the notion of study existed only as a fleeting illusion in my life. It was just Lucas and me maneuvering through the tight quarters of small apartments, pushing every dollar to its breaking point. The nights stretch in my recollection, where I sat on a worn couch, my gaze locked on the stack of unpaid bills, silently wishing he wouldn't notice the fear that held me captive. Nevertheless, he remained perpetually watchful. From a tender age, Lucas exhibited a remarkable talent for piercing through my facade. He would curl up in my lap, wrap his arms around me, and whisper that everything would be just fine. And in a manner that defies explanation, it always was. Before Lucas could even blow out a single candle on his first birthday cake, his father had already left this world behind. There was neither a dramatic showdown nor a flamboyant exit. A man who gradually slipped away from our lives, leaving no evidence of his presence. I frequently contemplated the possibility of seeing traces of him in Lucas as he grew older, but Lucas ultimately revealed himself to be entirely unique. He did not possess the same cool detachment or the instinct to escape. He stayed put. We tarried. Back then, the world around us felt rather confined. In a realm where the very walls murmured, the pursuit of secrets proved to be a fruitless endeavor, leading us to relinquish the idea altogether. Our discussion wandered through a multitude of subjects. I addressed his questions, no matter how uncomfortable they may have been. He entrusted me with secrets that many children would never dare to share with their parents. It was just how the narrative was destined to progress. We relied on each other, and I am convinced that connection has persisted. As he matured and developed, it was remarkable to witness the extent of his growth. I never felt the gradual slipping away of him. While his friends embarked on their escapades, Lucas opted to remain at home with me. He relished our time together, diving into conversations and exchanging jokes that were so awful they somehow evoked laughter from me all the same. I too found it quite enjoyable. His presence enveloped me in a comforting embrace, a warmth I deeply cherished. At times, it may feel quite overwhelming. Perhaps that sheds light on my deep dive into fitness. It surpassed superficiality. A surge of power coursed through me, instilling the belief that I could confront anything that awaited on the horizon. Every morning, I welcomed the cadence of my runs, immersed myself in the power of weightlifting, and started to care for myself in the way I genuinely deserved. It demonstrated its effectiveness. I noticed a positive shift in my well-being. I seemed more attractive. Observers made their observations. I took note. That confidence ignited a spark deep within me. It sparked a yearning within me that went beyond the basics of existence. I came into possession of this house, which features generous space, plentiful light, and a tranquil ambience. I promised myself to release any guilt that lingered around it. I have rightfully claimed it. Lucas was bound to face the consequences. Thereafter, I obtained the hot tub. At first glance, it appeared rather ridiculous to allocate such a substantial amount to something so extravagant. After all I had endured, it felt entirely appropriate. I notified Lucas about it before I placed my order. With a gentle smile, he urged me to embrace a bit of indulgence. To my astonishment, I discovered that he appeared aloof, while my emotions surged profoundly beneath the surface. On that first night, I settled in, staying there until my fingers took on the appearance of prunes. It was as if I had stumbled upon irrefutable proof that I had truly made it. With the weekend drawing near, my anticipation to spend it with Lucas became overwhelming. I gently hinted at the delight it offered, reassuring him that it would ease his muscles after a workout. He persisted in dismissing it, asserting that he probably wouldn't find it beneficial. However, when I asked again after dinner, he finally gave in. That should have marked the conclusion of the matter. A charming Rachelent shared with my son. As I reached for my bikini that evening, an unforeseen feeling enveloped me. Neither wrong nor correct, simply unique. I paused before the mirror, examining my reflection with a depth of focus that was unusual for me. Adjusted the straps. I delicately ran my fingers through my hair. I comforted myself with the thought that my excitement was simply for the hot tub. It was unwise to consider any alternative idea. Yet, a subtle tremor coursed through my hands as I carried our drinks outside. The night wrapped itself in an unexpected warmth, while the breeze softly murmured through the atmosphere. With careful precision, I carried 2 glasses outside, acutely aware of the possibility of spills, and set them gently on the edge of the hot tub. Lucas was already present, lounging against the smooth contour of the tub, as though this were a ritual he had mastered through the passage of time. He seemed remarkably at ease, a sight I hadn't encountered in quite a while. Shoulders at ease, eyes gently wandering. "I assured you it would be a pleasure," I said, as I entered the inviting warmth of the water, allowing the steam to envelop me. The silence, the calmness, enveloped me in a peculiar sense of being observed, even if it was merely by the fleeting image of my own reflection. For a fleeting instant, his eyes lifted toward the sky, only to descend once more to the bubbling water beneath. I masked my curiosity as my toes grazed the surface of the water. "I must confess, it exceeded my expectations," he remarked, swirling his drink with a contemplative air. "Nevertheless, I will hold on to this place. The jets appear to be perfectly aligned." "Oh, really?" I immerse myself in the water, leaning back as the soothing warmth wraps around me. But do not allow yourself to descend too far into comfort. This is my domain, and I am determined to take it back." "You snooze, you lose," he replied, a playful grin spreading across his face. With a sigh of exasperation, I couldn't help but let a smile slip onto my lips. It had been a while since we found ourselves in this Rachelent, exchanging conversation, laughter, and a feeling of comfort. It evoked memories of those evenings spent snuggled on the couch, lost in the laughter of beloved classic sitcoms. His feet would inevitably creep toward my side, compelling me to yield and let him stretch out with ease. This was the sole element that seemed distinct. Maybe it was the oppressive heat, or the way the water made every movement feel slow and heavy. It was perhaps the way his shoulders broadened against the limits of the tub, hinting that he was nearly too big for the confines. "Very well," I replied, drawing closer. "If you choose to stay still, then permit me to observe what renders this location so extraordinary." As we shifted our seats, an immediate wave of regret enveloped me. The jets precisely focused on the ideal zones, the lower back, shoulders, and legs. He shot me a look that implied he was acutely conscious of what he had let go. "I told you," he remarked, raising his glass for another sip. "It is no longer yours to hold. Would you like to make a bet?" I leaned in, pretending to reach for his arm, but he pulled away, laughter bubbling up from his lips. In a heartbeat, we were entwined in a spirited tussle, water spilling over the edges as I lunged for his arm, only for him to skillfully deflect my grasp. "Very well," he remarked, lifting his drink to shield it from any potential danger. "You stand triumphant. Please have a seat now." Filled with anticipation, I replied, and before I knew it, I found myself seated beside him, closer than I typically would be. The atmosphere changed, not strained, but strange. Something had shifted between us, and I found myself unable to articulate what it was. My heart stumbled, yet I held my ground. He did not either. I comforted myself with the thought that it was trivial. Embracing warmth, enveloping moisture, and an all-consuming intimacy. That was the entirety of it. The rhythmic pulse of my heartbeat resonated in my ears as I shifted, searching for a hint of solace. With every step I took, the truth revealed itself more clearly. "My apologies," he interjected unexpectedly. His voice emerged as a whisper, quivering with doubt. "That was never my intention. It is entirely acceptable." I cut him off, doing my best to keep a casual facade. "Simply the jets." Relax. He seemed far from comfortable. His cheeks bloomed with a vivid hue, and he turned his eyes away from me. A wave of guilt swept through me, but beneath that veneer, something deeper remained. Expectation. His gaze in that Rachelent held me spellbound, filled with trepidation and doubt. In that Rachelent, I felt as though I had unearthed a latent power within myself, a force that had lain silent until that precise instant. You know, I said, breaking the silence, this wouldn't have happened if you had just given my seat back. He let out a soft chuckle, and though the tension eased, it still hung in the atmosphere. He quietly slipped away from beneath me, murmuring something about the need for another drink, and emerged from the tub. I watched him leave, my eyes holding on longer than they should have. As he disappeared into the shadows, I released a breath tinged with doubt. What was that? I leaned back against the edge, my body buzzing with a residual vitality. It might have been harmless. It may not have been. Regardless of the circumstances, it remained a constant presence in my mind. That Rachelent left me feeling disquieted. His wide-eyed gaze reflected my own bewilderment, not a fervor, but a trepidation of something unarticulated beginning to take hold. As he finally stepped into view, the Rachelent had already faded, but my thoughts continued to dwell on it. I found myself returning to it, contemplating its significance, wondering if it was as untainted as I had led myself to believe, or if it carried an entirely different implication. I appreciate your presence on this journey we've shared so far. This story has not been the easiest to digest, and I appreciate your readiness to listen. If this video speaks to you, or if you know someone who could benefit from the insights I'm sharing, I encourage you to take a Rachelent to click that like button and subscribe. This inspires me to keep sharing stories like this, reminding me that I am not alone on this journey. Let us refocus on the matter before us. I comforted myself with the thought that it was trivial. It was undeniably an unusual Rachelent. Cozy warmth, delightful beverages, and a wealth of Rachelents shared in a snug little space. It was simply that. As dawn broke, I awoke with the events swirling vividly in my mind. His gaze held on to me, brimming with a blend of anxiety, shyness, and maybe a whisper of something more profound. At that instant, I found myself wrapped in a charming blend of exhilaration, admiration, and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. It was never my intention to tease him, at first not in the slightest. Yet the idea lingered, captivating in its hold. It started with a soft murmur. While I busied myself in the kitchen, I noticed I was dressed only in a tank top, free from the constraints of a bra. Even in his silence, I could feel the weight of his gaze, lingering like an unspoken thought. A brief glance, nearly undetectable, yet powerful enough to ignite a thrill that surged through my veins. The thrill gradually transformed into a familiar pattern. Leggings have supplanted sweatpants. Low-cut tops have taken the place of hoodies. I bent down to gather items more often, elongated my stretches slightly whenever I felt his eyes upon me, and looked for chances to brush past him just a bit closer than necessary. I comforted myself with the thought that it held no threat, just a game. With every session, my affection for it grew stronger. With the arrival of Christmas, a palpable change lingered in the atmosphere. The air around us was thick, charged with energy. It surpassed the realm of simple attire and Rachelentary looks. The humor was what drew me in, his playful repartee in response, exploring the boundaries to see just how far I would permit it to develop. "Careful, Rachel," he remarked one evening as I bent over the couch in my leggings and tank top. "You are on the verge of brightening someone's day." "Oh, please," I shot back, my eyes rolling in exasperation. One might think that after 2 decades, a certain familiarity would have nestled awkwardly between us. It does not suggest that I am devoid of vision. That stopped me in my tracks. He spoke it with an air of indifference, as though it held no significance whatsoever. Indeed, it was. An unsettling tide surged within me, prompting me to look away before he could discern the turmoil etched on my face. Once again, the hot tub became a focal point of discussion after dinner one evening. This time, the inquiry was unnecessary. Before I had the chance to say anything, he quickly collected the drinks and towels. I selected a pink bikini, bolder than the one I had worn before, and stood waiting for him outside. Upon entering, his eyes flickered downwards for the briefest of instants. Nevertheless, it was enough to elicit a smile from me. "Jesus, Rachel," he said, as he handed me my drink. "It appears you are teetering on the brink of falling out of that device. Oh, please stop this." A soft chuckle escaped my lips as I slipped beneath the surface of the water. "I would never want to bring you any discomfort. Believe me, the experience would be significantly more distressing for you." The words hung in the atmosphere, weightier than the mist rising from the water's surface. Neither of us took a step forward to press the issue. Still, the tension pulsed in the distance that lay between us. I tossed out a playful suggestion about switching seats again, but he swiftly brushed it aside. He emphatically declared, "Absolutely not. Once more, it seems. Not after the events of our last encounter. What occurred during our most recent meeting?" I leaned in, my head tilting slightly. He noted that his face was becoming flushed. "A tiny replica of me has decided to join in the celebrations." I caught myself chuckling, maybe a bit more than necessary. "Thank you for your kind words." His face deepened to an even richer shade of crimson, and I decided to let the matter lie. As he stepped out, and I glimpsed him through his damp shorts, that familiar thrill coursed through me once again. After Christmas, I stumbled upon yet another justification for postponing things. A sauna I selected as a gift for my personal delight. Lucas took it upon himself to manage the setup, while I made sure to stay close by as he diligently carried out his work. I stood in the doorway, dressed in a crop top and shorts, watching him as he carefully tightened the screws. "Oh, Mr. Handyman," I whispered, letting my fingers glide softly along his arm. "How will I ever repay you?" He let out a dismissive chuckle, but I noticed the brief flicker of his gaze lingering on my legs before he shifted his focus back to the instructions. I let it hang in the air for a brief Rachelent before pulling back. The next day, after finishing the construction, I asked him if he wanted to join me in testing it out. He hesitated briefly, yet I pressed him, urging, "Come on, you brought this to life. You ought to find joy in it." That accomplished the task. I slipped into a pair of shorts and a tank top, relishing the liberating feeling of going braless, just enough to keep the energy of the game alive. He stepped in wearing gym shorts, his torso bare, a figure of manhood rather than the boy I once nurtured. We settled into the sauna, our legs brushing against one another, and I sensed my heart begin to race. I reclined slightly and said, "You've truly done an outstanding job in here. Are you absolutely sure there's nothing more I can provide?" With a smile, he said, "I have a rather important issue that you might assist me with." I blinked, caught off guard for a fleeting Rachelent, yet before I could find my voice, he brushed it aside with a casual wave of his hand. I was merely jesting, naturally. I took it for granted that our guest had come back, and with a playful tone, I commented while stealing a glance at his shorts. His eyes flickered to my chest for a brief instant, but that was all it took to send a shiver coursing over my skin. "It appears you have company in the realm of hosting guests," he replied, his eyes lingering on the subtle silhouette of my nipples through the sheer fabric. I stood tall, attempting to conceal the flutter of nerves behind a casual smile, though I couldn't quite discern whether my performance was for him or for myself. It often happens after a workout. The timer rang, breaking the silence that enveloped the Rachelent. He was the first to rise, and I followed closely, our bodies grazing against one another as we made our way out. He stayed put. "Maybe I'll join you for a workout next time," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I would cherish that," I replied, though the words felt laden with a significance that transcended their simple meaning. That night, I found myself lying in bed, enveloped by a profound sense of restlessness. A fragment of my being longed to pause, to establish a boundary and return to the known, while another part hungered for the exhilaration of transcending limits, eager to uncover the extent of my endurance before something inevitably shattered. I had no intention of bringing it up, especially not in the way it ultimately transpired. After everything that had unfolded, the playful jabs, the sauna ratulence, the lingering glances, I found it impossible to ignore, and he felt the same way. begun in the very core of the household. While rinsing the dishes, I found myself dressed in a tank top and shorts, the echoes of my morning workouts still lingering around me. As Lucas drew near from behind, his hand brushed against my lower back while he reached for a glass, and I couldn't ignore it. The precise pressure that suggested this was anything but a simple accident. I lingered for a brief instant, a rush of warmth coloring my cheeks, yet I stayed rooted in place. "Your headlights are on," he remarked, a smirk playing on his lips as he gestured toward my chest. "Oh, so you took note, did you?" I replied, making an effort to keep my voice steady. Avoiding that proves to be quite a challenge. In that instant, the course of everything shifted irrevocably. He hesitated, as if in pursuit of the ideal phrasing, then asked nonchalantly, though it was evident he was uncertain about the limits of his expression, which aspects met expectations, and which ones did not quite measure up. The air felt as if it had been siphoned off, replaced by a disquieting stillness that lingered heavily around. He asked for permission, delving into the depths, and I could no longer pretend that this was just a product of my imagination. Ultimately, I proclaimed, "Words carry no weight. Do not hesitate to share whatever thoughts arise within you. If anything crosses the line, we'll just deem it a misguided attempt at humor and move forward." He seemed to embody a blend of relief and anxiety. I could feel the tempest of thoughts swirling in his mind, prompting me to delve a little deeper. "What does touch signify?" I asked. "What is deemed acceptable in that context?" He paused, a tightness gripping his throat as he forced himself to swallow. I find myself in a state of uncertainty. "I'm fine with hands," I said, locking eyes with him, "but let's make sure we don't cross any lines." When a sense of unease arises, we pause. Absolutely no humor involved. Authenticity reigns. He released a brief, anxious chuckle, but he nodded in assent. Indeed, I comforted myself with the thought that it was simply innocent, a playful agreement crafted between two souls who had long nurtured a profound connection. Nevertheless, the Rachelent held a significance that transcended mere words. My stomach twisted in knots as I confronted the pile of dishes, pretending not to notice the intensity of his gaze resting upon me. It wasn't long before we decided to put it to the test. As the night deepened, I stood at the sink, loading the dishwasher, when I suddenly felt his hand brush against my hip. Quick, yet purposeful. I shot up, crashing straight into him. He held his position firmly. He exerted just the right amount of pressure for me to feel his presence, and I looked up at him, my eyes wide with wonder. "It seems someone is feeling quite bold," I observed, my voice slipping into a lower register than I had meant. He replied that it was fine, but the flush of his face revealed a contrasting narrative. A furtive glance over my shoulder preceded my departure, but the warmth remained, a lingering presence, not even after he left to be with his companions. That evening, I delved into my closet, pulling out skirts, dresses, and tops that had sat untouched for years. I yearned for his gaze. An impulse surged within me, compelling me to keep pushing forward. As the first light of day broke, I embarked on my task with determination. Descending the stairs, I donned a fitted blouse and skirt that had remained untouched in my wardrobe for years. I convinced myself it was merely for my own sake, a subtle act of defiance against the sensation of being unseen. Just the perfect amount of buttons left undone to ignite the imagination. In the kitchen, he stood there, dressed solely in his boxers, and as he turned around, his jaw genuinely dropped. "Is that meant for me?" he asked with a playful tone, yet his eyes stayed locked in focus. I teasingly proposed that my attire should harmonize with yours as I edged nearer. He smiled, but I noticed the slight shift in his gaze. He had stopped making jokes. As he passed, his hand brushed against my lower back, and I leaned into the contact, subtly signaling my approval. The days that followed unfolded in a familiar cadence, marked by subtle gestures, lingering glances, and remarks that danced tantalizingly near the boundaries we both knew were wiser left unexamined. He became increasingly audacious, and I mirrored his courage. "You're going to get me in trouble," he remarked one evening, his voice laced with a teasing undertone as I leaned down to retrieve an item from the floor. "Perhaps I wish to," I retorted, straightening my posture and turning to face him directly. "You look nice," he said, his voice tinged with an uncomfortable sincerity. I chuckled at the remark, yet the compliment hung in the air far longer than it ought to have. As the week came to an end, it had transformed into something more than just casual remarks or accidental touches. It was embraces that stretched into eternity, a soft clash in the hallways where space was abundant. His hands grazed my hips as he leaned in to grab something, and with each touch, I felt that familiar thrill, a surge of warmth and intrigue that sparked my longing for more. Still, we found ourselves retreating time and again. We would laugh, exchange a quip, and carry on as though nothing had occurred. Both of us appeared to be uneasy about the consequences that awaited us should we decide against taking action. Still, neither of us desired to see it conclude. Not at this time. "I don't know what's happening," he admitted one night as we lounged on the couch, pretending to care about the television flickering before us. I mirrored the sentiment, feeling the same, yet it evokes a certain pleasure. "Indeed," he remarked, his eyes locked onto the screen, though his thoughts appeared to wander far beyond it. "Certainly it does." We set off with a shared awareness of the absence of commitments and the lack of conclusions, a tacit agreement, an unspoken comprehension to endure, to maintain the light-hearted exchange, all in the quest to uncover the destination it may reveal. In spite of my determination to keep a cheerful demeanor, I couldn't help but reflect on how long we could hold back. That evening, it took me by surprise. It unfolded in ways unforeseen, yet perhaps that was precisely what made it so compelling to pause. In the warm embrace of the living room, it was merely the two of us, wrapped in a comfortable silence together. The television cast a flickering light, but neither of us was genuinely captivated by its radiance. My legs rested, elegantly draped over his lap, as he absent-mindedly traced soft circles around my ankle. While it wasn't our first experience in such a setting, there was a palpable change in the atmosphere this time. He was completely earnest, devoid of any trace of humor or sarcasm. I wasn't either. The atmosphere was laden with unvoiced tension, a palpable heaviness that lingered in the space between us, yet neither of us summoned the courage to shatter the stillness. Only when Lucas finally exhaled did the silence shatter. He spoke in a hushed tone, his bewilderment clear. "I find myself perplexed. What is it that you desire?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. The unfolding events leave me in a state of utter bewilderment, bringing with them a considerable amount of distress. I pulled my legs in, sitting up straight to meet his eyes. His eyes wandered, avoiding my presence entirely. His eyes were fixed firmly on the earth beneath him. His hands gripped his knees tightly, as though he were in search of equilibrium. I admitted that I wasn't alone in this. My voice appeared to resonate, a gentle force that filled the space, even though it was scarcely more than a whisper. "I have also been striving to decipher it." He finally directed his gaze toward me, and in that instant, I perceived something raw and fervent in his eyes, a feeling that twisted tightly within my stomach. "Is it just me, or do others share this sentiment?" he asked. "I can guarantee you this is not a product of my imagination." "No," I insisted, "you are not." Once again, we were wrapped in silence, but this time it bore an even heavier weight. It was a treacherous Rachelent, where the slightest misstep in language could lead to complete chaos. I should have wrapped it up then, dismissed it, redirected the dialogue, but I discovered I was powerless to do so. I felt no inclination to. "I feel as though I'm losing my mind," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I often find my thoughts drifting toward us, contemplating this peculiar realm we've stepped into." Uncertainty enveloped me, a shroud of fear tightening around my chest. My breath caught, leaving me ratulentarily at a loss for words. But when I finally managed to speak, the thoughts spilled forth uncontrollably, escaping before I could gather them back. I emphasized, "You're not alone in this. My experience has reflected that sentiment." His eyes widened, as though the words had taken him by surprise. To my astonishment, I heard myself speaking those words, and once they slipped from my lips, there was no turning back. "I'm at a loss for what to do with it," he remarked. His voice had taken on a softer tone now. toying with my thoughts. Half the time, I feel an overwhelming urge to break free from this room's grasp, longing to quiet the incessant thoughts of you. In the other half, I find myself trapped, ensnared by the vividness of your memory. Though his voice dwindled, the essence of his message resonated clearly within me. My skin ignited with a fiery sensation, and my heart pounded with a fervor so intense that I was certain he could perceive its wild cadence. I should have spoken up, should have brought it to a close, should have recognized that we could not persist on this course, yet I chose to remain silent. It frightens me too, I replied, yet it also. Fear enveloped me, a heavy cloak of hesitation draping over my thoughts. I lingered, caught in the struggle between reluctance and the undeniable truth that I could not betray either him or myself. I must admit, it awakens a profound sense of vitality within me. The silence wrapped around us, and in that brief instant, we both remained utterly still, not a word escaping our lips. Lucas settled back, letting his head sink into the embrace of the couch. Mother of divine grace, he dragged his hands down his face, then shifted his gaze back to me. What in the world are we doing? I confessed honestly, uncertain as I was, yet I felt no inclination to stop. His eyes locked onto mine, searching for something elusive, maybe a nod of approval or a glimmer of comfort that he was still tethered to reality. Yet, all I could provide was the stark, unembellished truth. We cannot continue to sidestep this issue indefinitely. If anything ever seems to teeter on the brink, we will pause and articulate it clearly, without pretense or ambiguity. He nodded, but the turmoil in his eyes was unmistakable, and to be honest, I felt it too. Uncertainty hung in the air regarding how much longer we could uphold the guise of simple teasing. Yet for now, this was precisely what I desired. I longed for the intensity of his gaze as it locked onto mine, igniting a whirlwind of emotions deep within me. I should go to bed, he said suddenly, rising to his feet and running a hand through his hair. Indeed, I spoke, but neither of us took a step forward. He paused for a brief instant, seemingly expecting me to speak up, but I chose to stay quiet. As he finally turned and walked away, I found myself enveloped in solitude, wrestling with my thoughts, pondering whether what we had was already irreparable. The night unfolded in a haze of restless wakefulness. I tossed and turned, the conversation looping in my mind until its contours faded into a fog of doubt. A wave of relief enveloped me, as though a heavy burden had been removed now that everything was exposed. Yet, paradoxically, another part of me felt more encumbered than ever. I had crossed a threshold, one that existed only in the confines of my imagination, and I stood bewildered, uncertain of how to navigate my way back to the familiar ground I once occupied. The next morning, I found Lucas in the kitchen. He lingered at the counter, fully dressed, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in his hands. He looked up as I walked in, and for a brief instant, silence wrapped around us. But there was no hint of tension, a sharp difference from the previous night. Silence reigns supreme. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying a gentler tone than usual. "Greetings of the morning." I extended my hand toward a mug, meticulously pouring its contents as I focused on keeping my grip steady. His gaze fell upon me, igniting a flutter in my chest, but this time I held my ground, steady and composed. This time it will be different. As he started to recount the events of last night, I found myself cutting him off. A conversation is essential for us to have. I turned to face him, placing my cup down, but we must also confront the truth within ourselves. He nodded, but a flicker of anxiety crossed his face, as if he were unsure of what words might slip from my lips. Honestly, I felt a sense of uncertainty myself, but beneath it all, I recognized that we could no longer uphold the illusion that nothing was happening. It was unmistakably clear. "I cannot endure the idea of losing you," I proclaimed, no matter the situation. "You won't," he said, swiftly moving in closer. "I solemnly swear. However, we must not persist along this course, regardless of what it entails." My voice quivered, but I pressed on with determination. "It impacts us both, and I will not permit it to escalate to a point of no return." "What shall our next course of action be?" he asked, his voice quivering just a bit, evoking a deep sense of sadness in me. We set boundaries, authentic ones, without question. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to hold his gaze. Discontinue all communication. Put an end to the light-hearted banter. Should either of us feel that we are nearing a boundary, we shall express our thoughts. Indeed, quite well. There is no room for dismissal. He nodded slowly, but the uncertainty in his eyes was clear. He hesitated to let go of whatever tethered us in this intricate dance of connection. Nevertheless, a fragment of my being resonated with that sentiment. Nevertheless, I recognized the imperative for us to move forward and seek our path. I reached out, wrapping my fingers around his in a gentle embrace. Please know that this is not connected to my feelings for you. Your presence kindles a flame deep within me. That Rachelent will be forever etched in my memory. However, this cannot be the route by which I once again uncover that feeling. I must seek out what slips through my fingers, beyond the boundaries of this home, beyond our limitations. His shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Finally, after days of absence, I laid eyes on the boy I had raised. The person who had entrusted me leaned against me, looking up with a sense of reliance. Not the man who had been looking at me as though I were an unfamiliar face. I understand, he said, squeezing my hand in return. My feelings resonate completely with yours. Words eluded me in that Rachelent. I proclaimed that we would be all right, and deep down I genuinely believed it. It is crucial that we maintain it in that condition. He wrapped his arms around me in a hug, warm and reassuring, as if we had shared this embrace countless times before, just like all those who came before. As he pulled away, a palpable change hung in the atmosphere. With a newfound lightness, it seemed we had at last unshackled the tension that had held us captive for weeks. Subsequently, he set off to meet up with a few companions. I stood before the mirror, allowing myself a Rachelent to genuinely contemplate the image staring back at me, not just at my body, but at everything that envelopes it. The soft glow of my eyes, the way my hair flowed gracefully around my shoulders, the glow of my skin, effortlessly radiant even in its purest form. After countless years, I finally discovered a profound sense of beauty within myself. In great demand, it was entirely unrelated to Lucas. Not exactly. His talent lay in his capacity to conjure the feeling of being truly observed. In that instant, I made a solemn promise to myself. I would not let that feeling fade into oblivion. I would explore ways to preserve its essence. Amidst new experiences, captivating personalities, and the potential for a blossoming romance when the Rachelent was just right. However, it would not be by his hand. It was utterly impossible. As Lucas walked through the door that night, we effortlessly fell back into our well-worn routine. A meal shared, the glow of the screen, and light-hearted dialogue. Once again, it felt as if everything flowed effortlessly, warm and inviting, as though we had unearthed the very trail that brought us back together, even if we had relinquished something along our path. As I lay back in bed that night, a multitude of thoughts danced through my mind, every one resonating with the inquiry, what if? What if we permitted it to unravel even further? What if we had dared to cross that threshold? What if the part of me that craved knowledge persisted, never fully receding into the shadows? Uncertainty shrouds my journey, yet I remain keenly attuned to the complexities of my circumstances. I am driven to share this for a specific reason. It is possible that there is someone out there with a viewpoint I have not yet contemplated. If you have faced a situation like this, or know someone who has, I would truly value your thoughts. At times, clarity slips away from us when we are deeply immersed in the chaos. Allow this to stand as a touching reminder. Loneliness often guides you to unforeseen places. Proceed with care before you step over a threshold from which there is no turning back. Your readiness to listen is truly valued. Your thoughts hold great worth, so feel free to share them openly.